What if the scar you carry, the one you never asked for, was the very thing people used to humiliate you, right before it became your greatest strength? It was barely 7 a.m. when the chimes above the entrance of Maple and Main Diner jangled against the bite of the New Jersey morning air. Inside, the scent of sizzling bacon and hot coffee had already soaked into the walls, and the clink of ceramic cups punctuated the rhythm of a new day. Clara Morgan slipped behind the counter without a word. She tied her apron with practiced precision, her hair pulled into a low braid beneath a faded forest green cap that read "Staff" in barely legible thread. Her face bore no makeup, no pretense, just the quiet grace of someone who had spent years making herself small enough not to be noticed, and the single pale scar that made that impossible. It cut across her left cheekbone in a thin crescent, like a comma from a cruel editor. It had been there since she was 12, the day she dragged her little brother out of their burning SUV before it exploded. The windshield had shattered into her skin. The firemen called her a hero, but the kids at school? They called her Frankenface. At 28, she was still more fireproof than most people she served. But bravery doesn't always protect you from judgment, especially when that judgment wears tailored suits and $900 shoes. Booth 6 was already full when she approached with coffee in one hand and water glasses in the other. 4 young men, loud and hungry, dressed in crisp navy blazers and expensive watches that glinted under the diner's warm lighting. Tech consultants from Manhattan, judging by their lanyards, tossed casually on the tabletop, and the Wall Street Journal articles pulled up on their phones. Clara barely had time to set down the drinks before one of them leaned back in his seat and smirked. "Well, I guess breakfast comes with a side of horror story," he said, eyes locked on her cheek. The table erupted in laughter. Clara didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just stood there. The one with the tight fade haircut elbowed the guy next to him. "I swear to God, I thought Freddy Krueger retired, but I guess he's working mornings now." Another chuckled. "Bet she glows in the dark. Someone get the lights." Clara calmly poured coffee. "Cream and sugar?" she asked, voice even. "Oh no," the first one said, still grinning. "I like it black, like your soul." Clara turned without a word, lips pressed together, and walked back to the counter. Behind her, the laughter continued like applause at a comedy club. A few heads turned. Some patrons gave half frowns before going back to their pancakes. The manager, Simon, peeked out from the kitchen and caught her eye. She shook her head once. It wasn't worth it. It never was. But it always hurt. She busied herself with cleaning, stacking napkin holders and wiping down the stainless steel near the register. Her scar felt hotter than usual. Not from pain, just from how many eyes had stared at it in the last 60 seconds. That's when she noticed him. At the far corner, table 2. The quiet one. Neatly dressed, gray wool coat folded over the back of his chair, a worn leather notebook beside his coffee cup. No laptop, no phone, just presence. He had been coming in for the last 2 weeks. Always the same seat, always just after the rush, always a black coffee and either a slice of apple pie or a pecan muffin, depending on his mood. Today, it was the pie. She didn't know his name, but he saw her. Not the scar, her. He had been watching the entire exchange. And unlike the others, he didn't look away. He didn't wince or whisper. He just studied the group, then looked back at her. Not with pity, but with something else, something steadier. She turned away again. Better to stay busy. Better not to imagine kindness when none had been offered yet. 20 minutes later, the boys in booth 6 had left a crumpled $10 bill and a napkin with a smiley face drawn in ketchup. Clara didn't touch it. One of the busboys scooped it up with a grimace. As she went to refill table 2's coffee, she didn't expect anything different. Just another polite nod and a thank you. But this time, when she set down the pot, he looked up and said, "Thank you for the way you handled that." Clara blinked. "For what?" "For not pouring the coffee on their heads," he replied, a small smile lifting the corner of his mouth. She gave a dry laugh. "Tempting, but management tends to frown on third-degree burns." He chuckled. "I'm Julian, by the way." She hesitated, then said, "Clara." Julian nodded. "It's good to meet you, Clara, really." There was no flirtation in his tone, no edge, no pity, just that same calm presence. And for the first time all morning, Clara let herself breathe. The chime above the entrance jingled again just before 10 a.m., and enstruttled what Clara had learned to recognize as the Friday crowd. Four impeccably groomed young men, ties loosened with just the right studied casualness, eyes darting about the diner like they were above it all. They always chose booth 3, always asked for extra lemon with their water, always left Clara dreading their presence. This time was no different. As Clara approached with menus tucked beneath her arm, one of them, tall, manicured, and likely still living off his father's hedge fund, glanced at her and leaned in toward the others. "Oh, good," he said, smirking. "The horror hostess is back." Laughter, not the kind shared between friends, but sharp, mocking, loud enough to sting. Clara kept her shoulders square. "Morning, gentlemen. Can I get you started with coffee?" Another one, sandy-haired and cruel-eyed, tilted his head, pretending to examine her. "Tell me, sweetheart," he asked, "do they make you wear your face like that? Or is it just your natural talent for customer repulsion?" The third man snorted. "I saw a Halloween mask once that looked less terrifying." "Maybe she lost a bet," the fourth one chimed in. "Or maybe she just wanted to keep customers from asking for refills." They burst into collective laughter, and Clara felt the sharp sting of humiliation rise to her cheeks. Her hand, holding the notepad, stayed steady, though her nails dug into her palm. "I can give you a minute to decide," she said, voice clipped but controlled. "Oh, take your time, honey, but, The tall one squinted dramatically at her face. "If I lose my appetite, I'm blaming you." She turned and walked back toward the counter, trying to focus on the familiar rhythm of her steps. 1, 2, 1, 2. Breathe in. Don't let them see it land. Behind her, their laughter followed, low and smug, like smoke creeping under a door. From the corner of the diner, at booth 6, a man in a navy sweater had been watching. He wasn't a regular. Clara would have remembered his face. There was a softness in the way he watched her, not pity, but recognition. A subtle nod, as if he saw the same cruelty, and it stung him too. He didn't interrupt. He simply waited the way a person does when they understand that sometimes kindness needs to come slowly, like morning light. Clara took refuge behind the espresso machine. Her coworker Mia, a whip-smart 22-year-old with too much eyeliner and a heart like fresh bread, leaned over and whispered, "Want me to take over?" Clara shook her head. "No, I've got it." Mia hesitated, then handed her a fresh coffee pot. "You shouldn't have to." Clara looked at the pot like it was armor. "I've been through worse." And she had. Clara didn't notice him again until the brunch rush had thinned out, and the sound of clinking forks gave way to the soft murmur of Billie Holiday from the jukebox. Booth 6 had emptied, except for him. Still seated there, now with a second cup of coffee and an untouched slice of peach pie, he had his fingers laced around the mug like it was an anchor to something quieter than the world around them. Clara approached cautiously. "Would you like me to warm that up for you?" He looked up then, really looked. His eyes weren't the hungry kind, the ones that searched for weaknesses or stared too long at the mark across her cheek. His gaze was calm, steady, honest. "No," he said with a faint smile, "but thank you." His voice was low and smooth, the kind that made you instinctively lean closer. Not flirtatious, just kind. "You handled them well," he said. Clara blinked. "Who?" He motioned subtly with his head toward booth 3, now empty but still echoing with laughter in her memory. She stiffened. "I've had worse." "I believe you," he said. "But that doesn't mean you should have to." Clara didn't reply. She wasn't used to being defended even from afar. She especially wasn't used to people noticing without judgment, or worse, pity. "I'm Julian," he offered, extending a hand across the table. "Clara." They shook, his grip firm but gentle, the touch of someone who understood the unspoken language of walls. He glanced at the pie. "I asked if it was house-made. The girl at the register said you baked them." Clara raised an eyebrow. "And you ordered peach in November?" "I'm an optimist," he said, smiling. She snorted. "You'll be disappointed." "Doubt it," he said, picking up his fork. He took a bite, then blinked. Clara waited for the inevitable critique. Instead, he looked up and said simply, "Tastes like home." Something in Clara's chest moved then. Something buried. Something too soft for a world that mocked scars and measured worth by symmetry. "Most people just say it's too sweet," she said. "Most people don't know what sweetness is anymore." Clara hesitated. Then, against every instinct she'd learned to trust, she slid into the booth across from him. "Okay, Julian the optimist," she said. "Why are you really here?" He leaned back, still holding her gaze. "Because the world needs more people like you." She wanted to scoff, wanted to believe it was a line, a setup, a joke waiting to happen. But he didn't laugh, didn't smirk. Just looked at her like she wasn't the scar or the uniform or the label waitress sewn across her chest. He looked at her like she was whole. Clara didn't sleep much that night. She lay in bed with the television off, her phone turned face down and the moonlight cutting a narrow silver line across the floor of her tiny studio apartment. She thought about the words Julian had said. The world needs more people like you. It wasn't the compliment that haunted her. It was the fact that, for a moment, she had believed him. She reached up, fingers grazing the faint line of scar tissue that curved from her temple to just beneath her cheekbone. She had stopped flinching years ago, but the memory was always there. 12 years old, backseat of a rusted minivan. Rain hammering against the windshield, her dad shouting something, her little brother Ben in the third row singing off-key. Then the truck, then the metal, then the smoke. She hadn't thought, she hadn't screamed. She had just crawled through glass and fire to pull Ben free, before the flames swallowed the back seat whole. He was unharmed. She wasn't. 17 stitches, 2 skin grafts, a face she no longer recognized, and a name that became shorthand for pity in school hallways. They used to call her Melted Barbie, creative, cruel. Even teachers weren't subtle. One suggested she use her unique look for Halloween. So she stopped speaking, stopped trusting, stopped hoping. She dropped out of high school sophomore year, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table when their dad vanished 6 months later. Art school became diner shifts. Dreams became dishes. And over time, she learned the unspoken rule of people like her. Hide the hurt. Let them underestimate you. It's safer that way. The next day, Julian didn't come in. Neither did the day after that. Clara told herself it didn't matter, that it was just coincidence, that maybe the slice of peach pie had been disappointing after all. But on the 3rd day, she found herself wiping down booth 6 3 times, even though no one had sat there. She had just finished the morning shift when she heard the soft chime of the bell above the door. She didn't even have to look. Same dark blazer, same calm eyes, same notebook in his hand. She smiled before she realized it. "You're late," she said. "Traffic on the bridge," Julian replied, "and I had to stop by a bakery that doesn't know the meaning of decent crust." Clara arched a brow. Pie again? Always. She brought him the usual. Coffee, no sugar. Pie, slightly warmed. And this time, when she set the plate down, she sat with him, without waiting to be asked. For a few minutes, they didn't speak. Just the clinking of forks, the hum of the jukebox, and the late morning lull that wrapped the diner in a strange sort of calm. Finally, Julian asked, "Can I ask you something?" Clara looked up, cautious. "That depends. The scar, can I ask?" She stiffened, just slightly, but it was enough. "You don't have to tell me," he said quickly. I want to know, if you want me to." Clara didn't speak for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached up, touched the curve of the mark with 2 fingers. Not to hide it, just to acknowledge it. "I got it saving someone," she said. Julian blinked. "You?" She nodded. "My little brother. We were in a car crash when I was 12. I pulled him out, that's all." "That's not all," Julian said softly. "That's extraordinary." "No." Her voice was flat, tired. "That's survival. That's what you do when no one else will. You just move." He leaned forward slightly. "And what happened after?" Clara chuckled without humor. "I became a monster in my own town. No one said it to my face, not the adults anyway. But the kids did, every day. They made sure I knew I wasn't pretty anymore. Like being brave somehow made me less human." Julian's jaw tightened. His hands folded slowly over the notebook. "That's not bravery, Clara, that's cruelty." "They're the same thing sometimes," she whispered. Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A flower. Small. Purple. Wild. The same kind she kept in the kitchen window when spring rolled around. He placed it gently beside her coffee cup. "Sometimes," he said, "the things that grow from scars are the rarest blooms of all." She stared at the flower, then at him, and for the first time in over a decade, Clara Morgan didn't feel ashamed. The next morning, Clara woke to a sound she hadn't heard in years. Buzzing. Her phone, usually silent unless it was Mia from the diner or a food supplier, was vibrating wildly on the nightstand. At first, she thought it was some kind of emergency. Then she saw it. 43 missed calls, 112 unread messages. And one name stood out, repeating over and over again in the notifications from headlines and gossip blogs, Julian Cross. She clicked the first link without thinking. There, at the top of a flashy entertainment site, was a photo, grainy but clear. Her, sitting at booth 6, leaning forward just slightly, a laugh frozen on her lips. Next to her, Julian, smiling softly, his hand resting casually on the edge of the table. The headline screamed in capital letters. Bamona's mysterious billionaire Julian Cross spotted having pie with scarred waitress in Lower New Jersey diner. Her breath caught. She clicked another. Beauty or pity. Internet divided over billionaire's down-to-earth date. Then another. From diner to date night. Who is the woman with the scar? Her throat tightened. She dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud and skidded under the couch. She didn't bother picking it up. Outside, the city moved like it always did, impatient, indifferent. But inside Clara's apartment, time had stopped. She stumbled to the bathroom mirror and stared. Same scar, same face. But now, the world had seen her. And suddenly, everything was different. At the diner, the morning crowd was louder than usual. Clara had considered calling out sick. But what would be the point? Everyone had already seen. Hiding wouldn't fix it. So she tied on her apron like armor and stepped behind the counter. Mia, her coworker, rushed over immediately. Clara, oh my God, are you okay? You've seen it, right? Clara nodded. I've seen it. I'm so sorry, Mia said, her eyes wide with a mix of panic and pity. They're saying awful things, like really disgusting. Clara's voice was calm. I know. I swear, if that man set you up, if he leaked that... But Clara shook her head. He didn't. How do you know? I just do. She didn't explain that Julian had never once taken a photo of her, that he'd always looked at her like she was someone worth listening to, not showcasing. But it didn't matter. The photos had happened. The world had opinions, and Clara had nowhere to hide. By noon, reporters had already tried to sneak in. 2 fake customers with notepads, one woman pretending to order pancakes while trying to snap photos of Clara behind the counter. Julian hadn't called. Not yet. And Clara hadn't reached out either. She couldn't. She didn't know what she would say. Thank you for breaking the only piece I had left. Or worse, thank you for making me believe I could be seen without being exposed. The door chimed. Clara didn't look up until the room went quiet, until Mia touched her shoulder and whispered, He's here. And Clara turned. Julian stood just inside the diner. No blazer, no notebook, just jeans, a simple shirt, and a weariness that looked like it had settled deep in his bones. He walked toward her slowly, not with the casual confidence she had grown used to, but like someone uncertain whether he was welcome. Clara, he said softly. She didn't answer, not right away. The silence between them stretched too long. Then finally she said, You knew this could happen. I didn't leak it, I swear to you. But you knew someone would, eventually. He nodded. Yes? Her eyes stung. And you didn't tell me who you were, not once. I didn't want you to see him, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the headlines. I wanted you to see me. You mean the version of you who orders pie and compliments the waitress with the scar? No, he said gently. The version who sits across from a woman and sees someone extraordinary. Clara looked down, then back up. You should leave, Julian. I need space. He stepped back immediately, like her words had pushed him. I'll wait, he said quietly, as long as it takes. And then he left. No grand declarations, no second plea, just gone, leaving Clara standing in the middle of her workplace, under fluorescent lights and unwanted stares, wondering what it meant when someone saw all of you and still chose to stay. For 3 days, Clara Morgan disappeared. Not in the dramatic runaway sense. She still paid rent, still fed her cat, still made tea every morning, and stared out the window as the sun rose over Jersey rooftops. But inside, she had gone quiet. The world had screamed at her, through headlines, through cruel comments, through whispers in the diner. And now, she needed silence. She didn't respond to Julian's messages. She didn't check the tags. She didn't go back to work. Instead, she opened the door to the room she had locked 12 years ago. A narrow room, bare walls, an easel covered in a paint-stained cloth. The place where she used to paint. She pulled off the cloth and stared. The brushes were dusty. The colors dried out. But the canvas, blank, looked at her like an old friend who'd been waiting patiently. She sat down. picked up a brush, dipped it into faded red, and made the first stroke. Not perfect, but hers. It took a week before she painted something worth keeping. Then another to paint something that made her cry. Not because it was sad, but because it reminded her of who she used to be. Not the scarred waitress. Not the PR disaster. But Clara, a girl who once believed that beauty was messy, layered, and born from truth. One quiet evening, as the sun poured through her window like honey, Clara opened her phone. She scrolled, not through news, but through old photos. Then she found the one Julian had secretly sent her weeks ago. A picture of a wildflower pressed against her cheek, right on the scar. Some people think scars are damage. I think they're stories. She read the message again. And for the first time since the photo went viral, she didn't feel exposed. She felt seen. That night, she wrote him a letter. Not long, not heavy, just real. Julian, you once asked me what I was most afraid of. I think the answer was always this: being visible, being known. But you looked at me like my story mattered. You made me remember a version of myself I'd buried. So thank you. I don't know what's next, but I know I'm not hiding anymore. Clara. She folded it, placed it in an envelope, and walked to the mailbox. No one saw. But somehow, everything had changed. 3 weeks later, she stood in the center of a small art exhibit at the Maple Street Community Center. Children's drawings lined the back walls, abstract collages of laughter and crayons. But in the front, among curated local artists, was a simple painting, a portrait. It wasn't photorealistic, but the emotion was unmistakable. A woman sitting by a window, her face calm, her hair braided loosely, a faint white scar curving from temple to cheekbone. Not hidden, not central. Just there, like a soft brushstroke in a larger story. Underneath, a title, Seen, by Clara Morgan. She didn't expect anyone to notice it, but someone did. Someone who had been standing quietly by the exit, hands in his pockets. Julian Cross. He looked older somehow, but softer too. They didn't run to each other. No dramatic music, no spinning embrace. Just a quiet meeting of eyes. And this time, Clara didn't look down. He walked up slowly, stopped a foot away. "You're here," she said. "You wrote," he replied. Clara nodded, nervous. Did you hate the letter?" "No," Julian said, eyes full. "I framed it." She laughed. He stepped closer. "I wasn't sure I could ever be part of your world," she said quietly. "Not with all the noise." "But you already were," he answered. In every quiet moment, silence settled around them, soft and full. Then Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded napkin. Inside it, a single purple wildflower. She lifted it and gently tucked it behind his ear. "Now we're even," she smiled. Julian laughed, open, boyish, full of breath. "Clara Morgan," he said, "if you'd still have me, I'd like to help you build something real." "Like what?" "An art space, a bakery, a place where stories matter." "Scarlet and kindness?" she offered, eyes twinkling. His eyes sparkled. "Perfect." 2 months later, a new sign went up above a brick-front café tucked in the heart of New Jersey. Scarlet and kindness. Where stories are sacred, and every scar has a seat at the table. Inside, the walls held paintings and portraits donated by survivors, artists, and children from her old neighborhood. There was always pie, always jazz, always light, and always a small jar near the register that read, "Pay it forward to someone still learning how to see themselves." Behind the counter, Clara moved with ease, apron tied, scar visible, heart open. At the back booth, Julian wrote, occasionally glancing up just to watch her smile. One morning, a girl about 10 stood awkwardly by the door. A birthmark covered her left cheek. Her hoodie was pulled low. Clara walked over and knelt. "You okay?" she asked gently. The girl hesitated. "Do you hire people who look like me?" Clara smiled. "In this place," she said, "we don't hire perfect. We welcome real." She touched her own scar softly. "And real," she added, "is always beautiful." And that's how a waitress with a scar became a woman who rewrote the ending. Not just for herself, but for everyone who ever believed that being broken meant being unworthy. It didn't. It never did. Because sometimes the people we mock are the ones brave enough to live in full color, to carry their scars in daylight, and to build a world where every story matters.